Matches Strong, as always, here with the Doctor of Baseball, Eric Lindbergh, the Velvet Voice, of course, once again. And it's taken us a while to figure out a different way to do this. We were having trouble with uploading on particular platforms. We were going through like 3 different things the last time that we were doing the show, Eric. And so it kind of stopped us from being able to upload it where we wanted to in a timely fashion. And then it just kind of got away from us because we're all busy guys and stuff. So, but with that said, we haven't talked baseball in a long time. There's been a lot of changes. As I think you and I both predicted, Mr. Ohtani's now wearing blue instead of red. And there's been a lot of other things that have gone on with him. But first and foremost, how are you, and how's the baseball world treating you?
I'm great, Danny. How are you doing?
Good. Just running around. I've been all over the place from state to state to state and just doing all kinds of different stuff, whether it's family or work or, trying to make it happen with the shows and all that kind of stuff. So it's just been kind of one thing after another, constantly. So, and it's not ending anytime soon, apparently. So just trying to keep up with everything that's going on and, keep your head on straight while it's going on.
Yeah, I had, as you know, I retired after we took that hiatus from the last show, and I was able to do a lot of training almost every day this year, and just be a fan there. I forgot what it was like after 25 years.
Yeah, were you in Peoria, or where were you at?
Peoria was a surprise. I went to a couple of games in Kentucky.
Yeah.
So, but I live about a mile away from Peoria Stadium, so it's nice and handy.
Yeah, definitely. Tempe Diablo is always a fun place to go. Which is, the Angels. Wow, there's all kinds of not a whole lot going on there. So that's one of the things I'm sure that we can discuss. But the first one obviously is really big, which is the talent of Shohei Ohtani going up the freeway. Obviously, when he originally signed with the Angels, there was talks that he was talking to the Dodgers, but they didn't have the DH at the time when he originally signed with them, and then they changed that rule a couple years later. And so Artie Moreno has been quoted as saying, "Oh, I thought he would get something like what Mike Trout got. I didn't think it would go up to 700," which, I find that incredibly insincere of him to say something like that, because there's no way he doesn't have people around him going, "Oh yeah, this is going to be the richest contract in history." The Angels trade all their prospects. They didn't have a whole lot, but the guys they did have, they traded for a bunch of dudes they waived 2 weeks later last year trying to make something happen while Mike Trout was hurt, which made no sense at all. And then Ohtani, sure enough, leaves. They get a compensatory pick, which I guess if you knew how to draft might help you, but I'm not sure that that's going to help. So, although I will say, I really like Nolan Shanuel and Reed Detmer, some of the guys they've gotten high in the last couple drafts, and those guys are already in the majors contributing. So, hey, maybe I'm wrong there, but just judging from the system and all of that, they got rid of Cuero to get some guys from the White Sox that didn't really make any sense, and then didn't keep them. Still went over the luxury tax, so waiving all those guys didn't even help them there, which is why Artie won't spend any money now. Even though there's constant talk of them being in on Snell and Martinez. It's all lip service, folks. I'm telling you right now, it was never true. They were not in on those guys. That's the fan lip service so that fans don't get mad thinking that they're not trying. Mike Trout even said in spring training that they were trying to do everything they could he was trying to do everything he could in their ear to, hey, what about that guy? What about this guy? And all those guys, sure enough, signed with other teams, from Jordan Montgomery to Matt Chapman to, Blake Snell and everybody else who's obviously now with the Giants, and so is Chapman. So Scott Boras clients also are another thing that I'm sure that we can bring up at some point. But first and foremost, your thoughts on JD kind of going over to the Mets and replacing him with the Dodgers is Shohei Ohtani, who's still recovering from Tommy John on the pitching side, but the dude can hit.
Yeah, and JD went to the Mets, and he hasn't played good, I don't think. He had a little problem with the Dodgers last year and missed a portion of time, and now it turns out he had the same problem right after signing with the Mets. He was a late signing, one of the clients.
Yeah, just within the last 2 weeks. I think he's ramping up to get in baseball shape and all that stuff. Plus, yeah, I think you're right. I think he had an existing injury he's still healing from.
Yeah. But as far as Ohtani, I mean, he could be safe as DH. He's the best. I think he looks really good out of the blue. And he started to get hot coming out of the first couple of weeks. The last few games, last 5 games, he's had a couple hits every day. It seems like 3 home runs. And, so he's going to have a short year with the Dodgers. Betts has gotten off to a great start, to an incredible start for Mookie. And overlooked, because of those two guys, Will Smith, who I think is leading the league in hits and maybe batting average.
Brand new contracts, so, 140 mil they just gave to Will Smith. The Dodgers just have endless amounts of money. I mean, they just spent, within the last 6 months, they spent like $1.5 billion on contracts. Between Yamamoto, Ohtani, Will Smith, and I think Betts or somebody else. Plus they got Glass now, and all these other guys too.
Yeah. So, but this is the Dodgers. We know they're going to win the list. But after that, even with the Glass down, it's hard to say what's going to happen. One thing I will say is that I wish that everybody would consider giving a bye to the best team with the best records. Because look what's happened to the Dodgers the last 2 years. And you know what the teams do. Teams who got a bye. So I think everyone knows that taking time off after you win a championship is not the best thing in the world. So let's see how that plays out.
Well, I can definitely tell you that Ohtani. So number one, it don't take much for Ohtani to get hot. That's for sure.
Yeah.
He can hit to all fields, and at Dodger Stadium, I'm sure he's going to have a field day picking where he wants that ball to go. And he's fast on the bases, so he can turn anything into anything. If you have any of those laxed fielders, like they have sometimes in the NL, every once in a while you see them. I mean, in the AL too, but where you get somebody who's a little slow getting to that ball or getting it into the relay guy or messing around like Puig used to do for the Dodgers occasionally, guys like that.
Yeah.
If you get any of that, Ohtani's taking an extra base on you. He doesn't care. So they can tell him all day long. The Angels used to tell him, hey, be conservative, just like Mike Trout. They were telling that for years. Say, hey, be conservative. Don't get hurt. Don't slide head first if you don't have to. You're going to rip a ligament in your thumb. And now the bases are even bigger. So even though you would think it's safer because of the lack of collision, let's not kid ourselves. The baseball players purposely go for each other to prevent things from happening. So it doesn't matter how big the base is in that regard. They're still going to aim for the guy, not the base. So, interesting stuff. One of the things, too, that I think has really plagued baseball over the last few years that I just do not understand. I mean, I understand that they don't want to pay umpires, and so because of that, the trade-off is that umpires are highly protected and very hard to get rid of. But Angel Hernandez is just, they have got to figure out something to do with this guy. I mean, it's just unbelievable, the crap that he pulls in games. And I think at this point, he's almost doing it on purpose just to be like, haha, you can't do anything about it. It's unreal. Obviously, he had the discrimination lawsuit that I think got dismissed and never really went anywhere because they're not discriminating against him. They don't put him in postseason games. He just isn't good enough to be an umpire in postseason games, and that's the problem, much less a crew chief, and he really should never be calling balls and strikes, but he figures out how to mess games up from third base. It's kind of amazing, Eric, that this guy is still somehow employed, but I guess the union makes him untouchable until baseball comes back to the table and says, we're going to pay you guys more, and then we could talk about, disciplinary measures that we're now allowed to take.
And it's every game of Angel Hernandez. It's not just a once in 2 weeks period. Every game he makes a call that is real questionable. Look at the replay. It's horrible.
I saw a video where it was like he had 24 bad calls in one game because they're doing balls and strikes, where balls and strikes are being called opposite. He calls a lot of pitches that are way too high up in the zone, strikes that are literally 2 feet above. Like, they're not even close. It's not arguable. Like, people going, oh, well, you could have called that either way. It's not pitches that could be called either way. They're pitches that should not be called that way, like, at all. Like, anybody who's a pro umpire. Yes, maybe in Little League that happens, and whatever, but these guys know where the plate is. They know what the box is, and if he needs new glasses, get new contacts. I don't know what it is, but it feels like it's just a level of spite with him where I was hearing, and I've talked before to David Sampson, the former president of the Marlins, about that. He goes, there's nothing they can do, right? There's just nothing. They used to sit, and even on his show on Nothing Personal, he talks about how they used to sit in Manfred's office, and they'd go, there's nothing we can do. We can't do anything about it. So it's unbelievable that this guy can do this. And there's other umps that certainly have opportunities, and they say statistically he's actually not the worst ump, but boy, his calls sure get magnified because they are always in the worst time, and they're the worst calls that aren't even close, and you're sitting here like, what are you talking about? from the check swing on Bryce Harper last year to he already had one this year with I forget the guy, one of the Phillies players, where something like that happened. The one it was like last week where the guy stepped off the mound and then threw the ball and never made eye contact with the batter, and Angel called it a strike, and he's like, "What are you talking about? He never even looked at me." Like you have to look at the batter. You have to look at the batter at some point before you throw the ball. It's like, what rules are you umpiring by? Because they're not the same rules everybody else is playing by, right? So anyway, I always hate to have that negativity there hanging there, but it's a real thing that happens in games. So if you see Angel Hernandez calling balls and strikes or whatever for a game that your team has today, good luck. I mean, I'm being that sincerely. Good luck. I really hope it's not an issue in that game, that he stays out of it. So obviously Ohtani was hitting and stuff with the Angels, but he just didn't have any support around him. And the few times he did, it didn't matter because the Astros are so good that, the Angels can't sniff the Astros, or the Rangers, obviously, now with them winning the World Series and all that. It really came together for the Texas Rangers last year, and they were able to do some good things. And your Diamondbacks are always right there, perennial surprise every year, because the expectations aren't always there, but they sure, push when it counts and know how to be a thorn in the side of those other teams, whether they're a wild card or whatever. And I think this year, San Francisco's got some talent. If they can keep some guys healthy, get everybody ramped up, Snell, needs to, get back to being Snell. But they have the top two guys now from the NL Cy Young last year, between Snell and Webb, right? So there's no reason the Giants can't compete. And even though Soto went away on the Padres, that was really more of a financial move. They still have, now Tatis is in the outfield. They have some other really good guys on the infield. And they are still, right there. They still have good pitching. They just went out and got Dylan Cease from the White Sox, who's, a number one pitcher to go with what they already had. So the Padres in that NL West, Eric, are right there. The Dodgers certainly, obviously, with the talent, the amount of money they spend, their ability, their farm system, the Dodgers are really a premier baseball organization. The Dodgers, the Yankees, but especially the Dodgers because of their deep farm system in so many different countries, as Jim's grandpa originally kind of set out to do and did, and they've kept it going with everything that they've done ever since. And having Magic and guys that aren't afraid to spend money in that ownership group, it just puts you on such another level. And that's something that, as Angels fans, I think a lot of times, as much as there's a little bit of resentment there as far as like just the fan bases when they play, I think that the truth is that I think Dodgers fans feel bad for Angels fans, and I think Angels fans feel bad that Dodgers fans feel bad for them. And I think that it's just kind of this weird dichotomy of like, Artie, please sell the team. Artie Moreno, so for those of you who don't know, he was on the video board to start this season after letting Ohtani go for nothing, after letting all these other guys go that are now making impacts like Hunter Renfroe, who's not making anything and playing great for the Royals right now. We had him and could have easily brought him back for not a whole lot, and they chose not to do that either. And instead, they stuck Joe Adell out there again on a fifth year, the last year he's got to prove himself, and he's still making boneheaded plays and still hasn't seemed to learn anything. And Brandon Marsh is in Philadelphia after they had traded him there, and he's looking great. Now, granted, we got Ohapi for him, and Ohapi's been a really nice, solid catcher for us, but at the same time, that prediction I made a long time ago, remember when we were sitting here and everybody was talking about Adell versus Marsh and going, oh, Adell's going to be good, Marsh isn't going to be that good. And I was like, nope, it's going to be the other way around. Marsh is going to be good, and Adell's not. And that's exactly what has happened so far. Hey, maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe Adell will be an all-star this year, turn it around, and Marsh will go back to the minors. I don't know. But so far, that is not bearing out. And Marsh has already went to a World Series and been deep in the playoffs with the Phillies, and Joe Adell is still dropping balls in the outfield over the fence. So, whatever. Anyway, that's my vent for the day, Eric. That's my vent.
It's a good event, Eddie. The Angels they got some great players, some young players who are going to be their core players, but it's going to take a while. I agree with Josh Daniels. He's a good player. I think he only won 22 games in minors after they drafted him. That Murphy you mentioned. But those guys need time and experience. And, boy, the positivity speaks. Mike Trout, I don't know how you feel frustrated. Maybe not, but I feel bad for him. I don't want to see him leave the Angels, but I feel bad for him.
And anybody who thought he was washed, he was just not healthy, as you can clearly see this year, as he has started red hot for the Angels. He's hitting triples, he's hitting doubles, he's hitting home runs. His RBI numbers, per usual, aren't great because nobody's on base. Nobody's on base in front of him. So how can you have great RBI numbers? It doesn't matter how many home runs you hit if there's nobody on base. As far as RBIs go, I mean, you could still win a game 2-1 and hit 2 solo shots, but it's just unreal to me. And you know, the amount of disrespect I see about Mike Trout online for a guy that has done nothing but not deserve it is just unbelievable to me. And I know I'm a homer and people say that and all that stuff, but there is just, I don't understand what more you could want from a baseball player than what he's done. You know, even though he's...
I see it all the time. I'm disappointed in people call themselves fans, Angel fans. The kind of comments they make, and you know, I agree with you 100% on that.
Fairweather fans. When things are going good, we're fans, and when we're not really fans, which to me isn't really a fan. That's just somebody who's an observer, who's spoiled, who doesn't understand how the game actually works. This guy's been out there. It's so funny because for the first 10 years when he was winning 3 MVPs, nobody said anything, and it's the first time he gets hurt for 20 games, and then it turns into that a little bit more, and then the next season and the next season. Well, the guy's in his, getting close to his mid-30s now. He's not going to be able to play 162 every single year, but he is trying to. He played through a really bad wrist injury because he knew how bad they needed to keep Ohtani last year, and he tried really hard to get in there and play when he had a bone removed in his wrist. He's not, it's not like he had a scrape and he can't play because he had a scrape. He had bones removed from his wrist. Like, that's not an easy thing to just adjust to. You have to get used to the feel. You know what it's like, Eric, when you get jammed on a 100-mile-an-hour fastball? These pitchers, especially when they know that, they're going to jam you on purpose. They're not going to let Mike Trout just take them deep every single time. If they know you have a hand issue, they're going to pitch in. They're going to make it hurt, and they're going to make you not want to swing at that. This is the major leagues. These guys all have contracts on the line, and there's a very thin line between a guy making $20 million an hour a year right now and a guy that goes back to the minors or it's over for him next year because there's another kid getting drafted right now that's going to take his spot. So they are not going to mess around. They are going to go out there and they are going to try to get dudes out. And it's hard enough to get Mike Trout out. But I'll tell you what, some of the things we see this year, just in the small sample size, they played something like 10 games and the Angels are around 5. I think they played 12 games and they're like 6-6 or 6-7 or something now because they've lost their last couple. But Mike Trout is hitting the high pitches. He's hitting fastballs and he's hitting off-speed pitches. And that is not good for any pitcher. Now, I don't know if it's going to be enough to put his team anywhere good. They do have up-and-coming guys. Zach Neto, Logan O'Hoppe obviously is going to be really good. We'll see. I still don't think Joe Adell's going to turn around. They have some pitchers that are okay. They don't really have a 1 or a 2, really. I mean, that's the problem is they have a bunch of dudes that at their, like Sandoval at his best and Anderson at his best are probably 3s, maybe. Anderson's been pitching really well this year, who obviously came from the Dodgers last year and didn't have a great year. But he's on a 3-year deal, so we got him for another year or 2. So we'll see what happens. He's been doing really well this year, Anderson. Or maybe, if they're not doing well, they could flip him and try to get some of those prospects back. Maybe the Dodgers will, have an injury and need him back or something around the trade deadline if Artie doesn't get in the way of that. So we'll see. But, outside of that, there's a lot of really great things going on. Obviously, across the board. We saw the World Baseball Classic that we didn't get a chance to talk about, which obviously at the time you had the teammates Trout and Ohtani going at it. Which is kind of a weird time because I guess that's the only time they can have it is like before spring because that's really the only time on the calendar where those guys can do it. As opposed to a lot of people are like, well, why don't they do it after October? And it's like, well, all these guys are worn out, by October and they're giving everything they have in those last series, and they've already played 162 games and then they play, if you're in the World Series, you've played another, 30 games or something probably to get there in the postseason. So all kinds of crazy stuff going on, but we have more wild card teams now than ever. Baseball's in a good place in that way, but what is going on, Eric, with the Oakland A's or Sacramento A's or Vegas A's or A's of whatever? I don't know if they're going to be the A's for long. They announced they're going to a minor league ballpark because they can't work it out with the A's in the Coliseum. So this is their last official year in Oakland that we're in right now in 24. They have a 3-year contract after that to play at Sutter Field, which is I think a double or triple A ballpark in Sacramento. They have a 4th-year option just in case, and then that's assuming everybody goes, oh, the Tropicana just closed. They're getting that property. That's not a done deal either. So it's not a done deal that they're going to Vegas. They could end up in Sacramento for their foreseeable future, and that is I know they haven't been drawing fans, a lot, but the Coliseum's also a big, huge stadium made for football, not made for baseball. And Sutter is a very small seated. I think it's like 10 to 12,000 if you put people out in the grass in the outfield and stuff like that, like 12,000 people. So I don't know what's going on with Fisher and the A's, and they've been saying some weird things in the media. And so is Vivek Ramadev, who's the owner of the Kings, who also owns this AAA team in Sacramento and the Sacramento Kings in the NBA. And he's been coming out saying, well, this is our audition to get an MLB team and all this. And I'm like, I don't think you're supposed to be saying any of this stuff in public, dude. Like, I don't think so. Like, MLB is very, we don't want people to know what we're doing here because it could affect the negotiations with Vegas or with Oakland, because ultimately what they want to do is have a team in both places. They want to expand, put the A's in one of these, probably back in Oakland if they could, or in Sacramento if they have to, and then they would have Vegas there for a brand new shiny expansion team, because that's ultimately where they're trying to go, because the other owners get more revenue that way, so they're pushing to expand. Just like they are in the NBA. They're pushing to expand, and Vegas has proven, even though it's a relatively small market, they've proven that they can handle teams now with the Raiders and Aces and the Golden Knights, and obviously Vegas is a attraction-based town. No matter how many people are there, people love going to attractions there. So it's just built into who Vegas is to have these teams there. Yeah. And Vegas is a great town, Eric. I mean, I thought the Clippers should have went to Vegas a long time ago. I thought that was a perfect opportunity for them to get out. Instead, they ended up building a new arena in Inglewood, so they're stuck in LA. But, I wouldn't be mad, if the Angels looked at that, at some point, if they had to do it, but or if the A's don't beat them to it. But what are your thoughts on all this Oakland, Sacramento, Vegas A's stuff?
Oh, it's crazy, Benny. And the other thing is, the A's as a team, what they put on the field, have they just resigned themselves to being last place every year and being a conduit for their players to put up teams? They're like a minor team. And even though the stadium is Sacramento only 10,000, 12,000, they will draw there more than everyone in Oakland. That's a sad fact. Gosh.
It's about 85 miles. About 85 miles from Oakland. So there's a lot of people like, oh, well, it's just still going to be near Oakland. Well, sort of.
Not really. It's a long drive. I made that drive. I was Billy Bean for a long time. GM, president of operations or something. And I had to wonder why is this all happening this way? Why is it playing out as far as the team itself? Because who wants to watch the I would watch. Do you?
If it's against the Halos, which we play them obviously a lot, but we might end up being last place. I mean, so far the record's not that bad for Angels, but the A's they did just sign J.D. Davis, who was kind of the guy that got ousted out of the New York situation when they signed Martinez, because they had him last year, and so he was kind of floating out there, and they got him for like $2.5 million, which basically to Billy Bean means I'm going to sign you, prorate that so that you get paid, mostly at the end of the season, and trade you by the trade deadline for other prospects that I can develop later. So, I mean, on the field, they always put together something. So I don't know if they're going to be 100 losses or whatever. In fact, sometimes it's the way they can build a team. Sometimes it's to their own detriment, because unlike Houston, who built their team through losing 100 games and 100 games and 100 games and 100 games year after year, and got all these amazing prospects through the draft and everything, and drafted well, no doubt. That had a lot to do with it. Getting guys like Bregman, Altuve, Correa, Springer. A lot of the pitchers they've had, from Valdez to, they have supplemented that with guys like Verlander and whatnot, but especially their really good years and a lot of good bullpen help and stuff. So certainly the Astros have learned how to build a team, and that's kind of in their blood too, because they came from the National League, where you had to build a team to compete like that. Because obviously they were in the National League for a long time before they got swapped over to the AL West. Thanks, Bud Selig. Anyway, but obviously somebody had to go, right? So it made sense geographically. Yeah. But so I mean, obviously Houston's a really good team, but Seattle's been making some moves and doing some things, and obviously DePoto's up there. He's been doing some things. Obviously, Texas has still got a lot of that team left, and they've been supplementing with piece here and here and here, and trying to figure out how to keep what they have going with Seager and Simeon and those guys while they still are relatively in their prime and all of that. So they're trying to figure that out. And they've Jung and Heim and all these guys are really good that they've been able to get. Obviously, they have some good guys coming up through the minors, and Holiday just got announced that he's coming up with the Houston Astros. But the A's, they draft well, and they really know how to bargain shop for purpose. And they go, this guy does, out of the 10 things that a ball player does, he does 2 of them well. We're going to use him for those 2. And that's it, right? And that's how they do what they do. That's basically what Moneyball is just figuring out how to use guys to get on base and figure out what to do with the other guys they have to drive them in some way or another. And sometimes it works out for them, sometimes it doesn't. It's kind of a game of odds, but they try to play the probabilities, and a lot of times they get lucky and they compete. They don't usually win the World Series doing it, but even in Moneyball in 2002, they didn't win the World Series that year. Somebody else did in that division. So, that's the kind of thing, but they know how to do it. But as far as a home permanently, I've already heard a lot of the MLB players come out and say a AAA ballpark is not a major league ballpark, and that's not acceptable from a player's perspective, but it's not up to them. So they can say and complain and piss and moan all they want about the games they have to play in Oakland, whether they're an A's player or somebody visiting, for the weekend or whatever. But it doesn't matter what they think, that you're going to have to play there if that's where the team's playing. So, if they don't like it, they're going to have to go to their reps. But their reps have other things to fight for that are higher on their list than where a team's located. So I don't think that's going to matter. They're going to have to figure out how to either get to Vegas or make a better deal with Oakland. And I love the terminal idea that they had in Oakland. I thought that was really good. I think if they do end up going to Vegas, they should drop the A's name and leave it in Oakland so that if they get a team back at some point, that they can have it, because Oakland's been there, even though I know the A's weren't originally from there. I think they were originally from KC, or I can't remember now, but they were from somewhere, Philadelphia. And so, but I don't know. I think in Vegas, it should be the Vegas Outlaws or something that matches Vegas. The Vegas Athletics sounds kind of weird. I don't know.
I agree. Keep the name for future use.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Sonics. Like when the Sonics moved, they weren't the Oklahoma City Sonics. They became the Thunder, and now, you might end up getting the Sonics back at some point if we expand, and Vegas and Seattle are 2 of the markets they're talking about in the NBA. So that'd be cool. Right. Like the Cleveland Browns when they moved and became the Baltimore Ravens, and then the Cleveland Browns came back, right? It gives you that opportunity to do that when you leave the name. But it's all about money, and whatever makes the most financial sense is usually what actually happens, no matter what anybody else wants or thinks. So we'll see how that plays out. The betting scandal with Ohtani. So there were so many parts of this, Eric, that have come up with Ippei Mizuhara, who was this longtime interpreter the whole time he was with the Angels, and obviously up until a couple weeks ago, or up to 2 months ago, or whatever it was now, when he had already signed with the Dodgers, and they were already opening the season in Korea when all this kind of came to light, and he was there with Shohei as that was happening, and then Shohei said, "Oh my God, I had no idea what was going on." And Ippei originally gave an interview. Somehow, the Dodgers granted him access to do a 90-minute interview with somebody from ESPN, and had no idea that gambling was involved or whatever. And he did this interview, and they asked him, and he came out in the interview and said, "Yeah, well, Shohei knew and was helping me cover my own gambling debts, and this all came out because there was a guy in Orange County named Matt Bauer who's being investigated for some kind of illegal gambling ring," and Ippei claims he didn't know that it was illegal. But today, more statistics came out about it, and it is stunning. Like, he placed something like 119,000 bets over like 8 years or something like that, and the amount of money he ended up losing 40 million. So he bet and won something like 140 million and lost 180. So he had a net loss of 40 million, and he stole 16 is now the number they're at. $16 million from Shohei. He turned off all the notifications on Shohei's account so he wouldn't know that it was happening. When Shohei's agent tried to access the account, he said that Shohei told him through interpretation that he wants to keep that particular account private and that nobody needs to be worried about it. And the agent apparently bought that. I don't know. It's all of this doesn't sound right to me. When Shohei came out and did the presser where it seemed like he was kind of emotional, but at the same time, it's like, how does somebody rip you off for $16 million and you don't even notice? Like, how does that happen? Like, and I don't want it to be that Shohei was involved, because obviously that would not be good for baseball. He's the perfect guy they've been looking for forever, an international superstar that can help expand the very niche baseball audience. That's an aging audience that is, that's a problem that they cannot seem to figure out, is how to get the younger audience in. And a guy like Shohei increases demographics, increases interest. He can pitch on both and pitch and hit, so he appeals to so many different audiences. He's literally the perfect guy they've always been looking for, and now he's on a major market team with the Dodgers, even though he was in LA kind of before that. But he's still, now he's on one of the biggest two teams in all of baseball as far as market share, with the Dodgers and the Yankees, and it's a perfect situation. And then immediately this drops in their lap as they're starting spring, and somebody lets him give a press conference that's kind of not really helping, and he doesn't take questions, which makes you kind of wonder, like, is there something else to this? And now it's coming out that Ippei's doing some kind of plea deal for the $16 million that he stole, and it's some kind of federal charges is what's going on, because this was a federal sting. And I know everybody goes, oh, well, you're innocent until proven guilty, but other people as part of the sting have already pled guilty. And so whether he knew or didn't know or whatever, other people that were involved in this particular operation have already pled guilty for other reasons other than stealing like one guy's money, but for what they were doing within the operation and gambling. So obviously gambling is a huge topic in baseball. Obviously Ippei probably won't work in baseball. He says he never bet on baseball, and you are allowed to bet on other sports, but why would you? I just don't, it's just not even worth the time and energy to go into it. And apparently lied on his resume. He didn't really go to UC Irvine, at least not under the name that he says he is, and all these other factors. So as we kind of blend all this together, just to kind of summarize, what are your thoughts on all this craziness that went on with this? And to me, Shohei left himself in a very vulnerable spot if he really didn't know that $16 million is missing. I know the guy makes a lot of money off the field, but good Lord, $16 million is missing? Like, come on.
Yeah, I believe he wasn't involved, actually. I really do. But still, the whole situation coming out right at the beginning of the season, and like you said, in Korea, it cast a shadow over everything over those first two games in Korea. It was all they were talking about. Not what was going on in the field, but what was going on with the situation. And the world we live in today, with social media, instant access to everything, you know it's going to get blown up. And people need to realize that you have to wait to see, you hear a story or hear something that really is blown up like that. You need to wait to hear all the facts, see how it plays out before you start making judgments and down this guy. It was bad overall, the whole thing. The whole thing was bad overall for baseball, bad for Ohtani, bad for the Dodgers. And we'll over at some point they stopped talking about it. I don't know. This is one of those things that we may be hearing about this during the next years. They'll still be talking about it. It's disappointing, and I just was really bothered by fan reaction, media reaction. I mean, I saw people calling Shohei banned from baseball the first day that this happened. So come on, man.
Pete Rose, people who don't understand the situation, it's not the same.
That's exactly right.
Pete was betting on his own team, and it wasn't through an interpreter, and then he lied about it several times before he eventually kind of came clean. He still hasn't really come all the way clean, which I think is part of the issue, is why he's still not there. And Manfred, I don't think, wants to be the guy that let him back in, and I think it's that simple. And Pete's to the point now where I think he's got to be close to 80 or in his 80s, and it's not. I don't think it's going to happen. Maybe posthumously, but there's also some level of baseball, I think, that they're like, not while you're alive kind of thing, and I don't agree with that. I think that should have nothing to do with it. But I don't think that. I don't doubt that, it's just like with Ohtani. It's just like, O.J. Simpson died today of cancer. O.J. was a great running back. He was a really funny actor, but he still killed two people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you can argue about, oh, well, he was never proven to do that. Well, that's because, okay, I was in LA at the time. The Rodney King riots happened. They let him off the hook to make up for that because the community felt like that was a grave injustice, that cops got off for beating the crap out of Rodney King. And so they felt like we're going to get one back with OJ, who's kind of our hero from USC and from, he played for a bunch of different teams, including Buffalo Bills. And for about 10 years, he was as good as anybody as a running back in the NFL. And then he went on to do Naked Gun and some other movies that made him a pop culture icon. And then he killed 2 people. So, I mean, and then he robbed people later to try to get his stuff back that was stolen in the civil trial that he was found liable in. So, I mean, those are just the facts. That's just the facts of the matter. If you didn't kill 2 people, why is your blood all over the scene? You know what I mean? Why did people at your own house hear you come back in? Why is it this? Why is it that? Just because Mark Furman said the N-word a bunch of times doesn't mean that you didn't kill 2 people. It just means that he said the N-word a bunch of times and you killed 2 people. So I don't, there's really no ifs, ands, or buts. There's probably no murder case that has more solid evidence other than an actual admission from the person involved than the O.J. Simpson case. It was pretty cut and dry. But it is what it is. I mean, he got off, so.
Let me go back to Pete Rose for a second. Because in the past, you and I, as a member, have disagreed on this. And I've kind of come full circle, and I agree with you. He should be a legend alive. And because really, it's what you do on the field that matters whether you're in the Hall of Fame or not. Now, Rose getting on baseball, that's close to being on the field, but it's the biggest violation you can make in baseball. But still, the all-time history, the superstar, the guy that had World Series rings, just a great player throughout his career. He belongs in the Hall. I didn't. You might remember, I used to not say that. I disagree with you on that.
Yeah.
Well,
I get that. Well, a lot of people have the argument, well, there's a higher standard. And I'm like, yeah, there is for the Hall of Fame. I get that. But at the same time, it's got to be proven, right? Like it's just not, you can't just assume things about people. It's just like the steroid guys, right? Like, we don't know who did and who didn't. We'll never know who did and who didn't, other than the guys who admit it openly, which we hold it against them, and that's why nobody else admits it, right? And that's the exact reason, just because at the time it wasn't even, which people forget about the 90s that's judged retroactively now, is that it actually wasn't against baseball's policy at the time. Like, it wasn't against the rules. So even if they did it and you don't like it morally, it actually wasn't against the rules. So it's like, it's like now getting mad at it's like if weed wasn't against the rules, but the players are doing it anyway, but you morally disagree with it. Like, okay, you can morally disagree with it, but does that make the accomplishments any less, right? And I understand that's a little different because you're talking about something that actually can enhance your performance physically, but I still argue, like, with people that argue about Barry Bonds, I'm like, dude, there's no way that steroids are going to help your hand-eye coordination. Yes, it might help it helps your recovery is what it does, so it lets you be more consistent. So in that regard, yes, maybe it helped his numbers, but hitting a baseball is real hard. Anybody in every sport says that's the hardest thing to do in all of Major League Baseball, or in all Major League sports, is to hit a baseball. That's still the hardest thing because it can go anywhere. There's so many different types of pitchers. You get attacked in so many different ways, and that's what forces teams like the Houston Astros to come up with trash can signals, right? Is because of how hard it actually is to do that. So, I mean, that's kind of where I think a lot of it kind of gets lost in the muck sometimes. Is it the Morality Hall of Fame? I've heard people like Rob Parker say that before. Is it the Baseball Morality Hall of Fame where all these guys and a lot of the people, what's crazy is a lot of the people that won't vote them in now in the Hall of Fame voted for their MVPs and voted for their other awards when they were playing. And so it's kind of like, okay. And then if there's a fan favorite from one of the major markets like New York or Boston that they want in, they'll let that guy in, even though there's some questions, but they won't. David Ortiz had a lot of questions about whether he was involved or not involved and all of that, and people kind of hold him in a different regard than they do some of the other guys like Manny Ramirez, who were even on his own team and have been kind of also involved in being mentioned in some of those things. So, point being, without real proof of anything, I think that you do go to the accomplishments like you're saying on the field, and I just don't understand. Pete Rose is one of the greatest players of all time, and what the sad thing is that a lot of people now don't realize that because he's not. Although people also argue that he is mentioned in the Hall of Fame. It's just he is not himself on a plaque in the Hall of Fame, which he did earn the right to have. But you could argue he forfeited it with gambling, but whatever. I mean, potato. You know, there was the Black Sox. There's been other scandals in baseball. You know, it is what it is. So as we look kind of into this more, obviously, you know, we'll see what happens with Ohtani's interpreter. Apparently, he's cutting a plea deal and all of that. We'll see what happens with the A's and where they end up, although apparently they've signed that deal and they will be in Sacramento for the next 3 years, 25 through 27, with an option for 28. We'll see if the actual ballpark in Vegas gets built or not, because there's actually no agreement to even build anything right now. And, you know, the Tropicana apparently did hire a company to sell everything that's not bolted to the ground. That's left over from, they just closed on April 2nd, which that kind of annoyed me. I was like, take the Luxor, not the Tropicana. But anyway, the Luxor's already sinking into the ground, so they might as well. But the MGM owns that now, so they're not going to get rid of that. So obviously, baseball's in an interesting place. You know, the pitch clock and all these other things that they've done. The union came out and said that the pitch clock being too fast is the reason for enhanced pitcher injuries and ligament injuries lately, and that it's went up since they instituted that rule, and that they need to dial it back. Baseball's been pretty steadfast even during the postseason last year, going, oh, well, we'll keep an eye on it, but we want the game to stay fast-paced, because they feel like that's their entry into a younger audience, is to have the game be faster and less boring, because that's what they get from people who aren't baseball purists that obviously understand why those moments happen. Even in the, I think I was looking, even in the Baseball Classic, the at bat between Ohtani and Trout that was so amazing. Every single pitch would have been a pitch clock violation under MLB rules. Every single pitch. So, and we all remember guys that took advantage. Like David Ortiz was one of the ones where he would walk around, and you're just kind of like, dude, just get in the box. Like, what are you doing? Like, and guys like that are why they had to kind of step in and go, I can't do that anymore, you know, and or Nomar with the constant, you know, glove thing every 10 seconds, and it did get a little extreme with certain guys, but that was only once in a while.
Even farther than that, Don Sutton, when he pitched for the Dodgers, used to take an incredible amount of time on the mound. And he would say, well, nobody can do anything until I throw the ball, so I'm taking my time. And, oh my gosh, I saw him many times, and you'd be on the other seat, come on, let this thing go. But, you know, I'm not a big fan of this clock. Is it to blame these arm injuries? I don't know about that. I don't know. I've had people argue that it is the main reason, but I also want to put some of the blame on the pitchers themselves. Young pitchers who are trying to get triple digits on the ground all the time, and just firing as best they can. You know, go way deep pitchers in high school or even grade school. Right now, throwing way too much. Throwing way too many pitches during the games. So I don't know. It's one of those things that it's going to be an issue all year. Probably. I don't know how they're hiring it out. If the union feels that strongly about it, I can't believe they will take some kind of action. But I don't see what's wrong going anywhere for the league, you said.
Yeah. I think baseball likes it. I go back and I do think it's a little too short. I think they could, lengthen it a little bit. I think it's something like 10 seconds. I think it should be maybe more like 15. But I would take 12, just as, as an incremental improvement. The one that gets me is the extra. I get going in extra innings, and games used to go on for 20 innings, and but putting a guy on second base in extra innings to me is just so ridiculous. Like, I don't understand that one. The whole point of baseball is to get on base and move the guy along, and if you can't do it, you shouldn't just be given a guy to do it because you want the game to end sooner. And I think that just encourages the nature of all these umpires that are making stupid calls to get the game over with, which they never say out loud, but we all know happens. So, it's the same thing where, you get to the end of a game and it's a game in the middle of a month where it's not the postseason or something like right now, and you'll see an umpire ring somebody up on a pitch that's not even close because it gets the game over with. and and keeps it from being tied or whatever. And then they go, well, you could have swung, so they try to talk their way out of it. Which I don't think that's good for the game either. I think they need to pay umpires and start fixing these umpire problems. If that means you got to pay them more money, then you have to pay them more money. I'm sorry, I mean, that's just the way that it is. That's how the economy works. Things go up in nature, and you're going to have to pay these guys. But you'll probably get some concessions, like being able to hold them accountable, which would be great. Put somebody in place that can actually do something when these guys are not performing. It is ridiculous to keep putting up with these umpires that suck just because you don't want to have to pay anybody. I mean, that's just not a good way to do business. I know from a financial perspective it is, but it's not from a performance perspective. And they're so worried about all these other things affecting the game, but that one's so egregious and obvious, and that was the one that they just seem to not. I think it's because they're going to go to auto umps at some point. And they know it's coming, and that's why they're like, oh well, we'll just deal with this for as long as we have to, and then eventually we'll have auto ump technology to where we want it, because it's still not where they want it yet. So they haven't made that move, but and I think it'll be like a lot of these rule changes where at first people are really upset about it, and then after a while they're gonna be like, wow, like the calls are a lot better. So and the game will evolve, and it'll evolve and change, and people will get used to it. Just a second,
I want to bring something up.
Yeah.
I was on a show earlier today, and I was asked this question: is Trevor Bauer going to resign by anybody? And I'll tell you what my answer is: I'm not sure, but I firmly believe he will never manage what he will again. And not because of that situation he was involved in, although the fact that he was in that situation and he admitted certain things he did goes to his character big time. And that goes to the fact that every team he's ever played for, he's been the most disliked player on the club. He's not a good teammate. He's not a good clubhouse guy. And he proved that every way. So he got out of himself. I don't think he'll ever pitch again in Major League. And I wish he would take her out and do that. Last year I tried to get him to take me off the game. I kept getting these things from
the Bauer outage line of stuff that he sells. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the game that stuck out to me before even the controversy happened, before he had even signed with the Dodgers, was that game. You remember that game when he was in Cleveland and he threw the ball over the outfield fence, and Terry Francona, who was not the manager to do that to, by the way, not at all. He came out there and was like, dude, what is wrong with you? Like, oh, I didn't like the call. We all don't like a lot of calls. Like, you can't just throw the ball into the stands. And I understand they have a lot of balls and that doesn't really matter and all of that. But, like, it's just... It's
kind of thing a 6-year-old kid do when he gets lit up.
I have no doubt that Trevor Bauer can pitch even right now. I have no doubt that if he came back and went through, some type of ramp up and stuff, that he could pitch on a major league level and be a pretty decent starter. I don't know if he'd still be a Cy Young type of guy, but I think he could still, win 10 games and, help somebody. But I don't think it'll happen either. And I think that a lot of that has to do with they look at what happened to him and they use that. But the truth is when baseball decides that you're not going to play in baseball anymore, you're not going to play in baseball anymore. And that's the way it went with Puig. And if you look at them, even though it's a little bit different, and I admit that it's a little bit different, the antics of somebody like Puig are why he's not in the league. It's not his talent. The antics of somebody like Bauer are why he's not in the league. And he can argue all day long on social media and stuff, but the more he does that, the more it works against him. Because they don't want players that are going to fight the status quo and fight the system. They want players who go along with the professionalism and the bullshit and the umpires that are bad and, maybe say something in private, but they don't want it public. They don't want it like the NBA where you have players like Draymond Green on a podcast after he gets ejected and they talk about it. MLB doesn't want that. They don't want that kind of exposure in that way. They're just not as much as they've made some modern improvements lately with rules and different things that you can argue whether you like or don't like or whatever, right? They're still a very traditional, and their audience is still very traditional, and they don't want to see that stuff. And Bauer can, there's a lot of leagues he can pitch in if he wants to continue to pitch, and he'll make, decent money and be the number one attraction on those teams and, get the attention that he obviously likes. And, that'll be good for him. But, look at the difference between a guy like him and Glasnow. Both of them, Jim Wagner, who we know helped and with pitching at different times and stuff. And but Glass now is a guy who's been to a World Series with the Rays. He's always had a great demeanor, disposition, and he's a very comparable pitcher as far as his ability to Bauer, but much different path, right? And he's on the Dodgers and doing really well now, and I think he'll continue to do well because he has all the support there to do well and continue to do well. And sustainability is, he probably added some more prime years to his career where he'll be competing, and they're going to need that because, who knows how long Kershaw is going to be around or effective. It happens quick, just like it did with with the Angels. I mean, it's a much different situation because Kershaw's an all-time great. But even like a guy like Jared Weaver at the end, it happens so fast. It happens so fast at the end. And with all the back issues Kershaw has, they never know how that's going to play out. He'll kind of, he's already kind of showing it where he's not as consistent as he once was. And then he'll come back and kind of look like that guy for a couple games, and then he'll go out again. And so it's that natural attrition process that happens to everybody is happening. And they have to plan ahead. And that's why they wanted to get Yamamoto and Glass now. Plus, they lost Urias, who was part of their plans moving forward. That they're not going to have now. Bauer, a guy they signed, they're not going to have now. So those are two top tier pitchers, and most organizations can't recover from losing one or two guys like that. And the Dodgers can because of their immense resources. They can go, okay, we're going to cut that guy, we're going to pay him anyway, and then we're going to go get somebody else. And they can make decisions like that a lot of other teams wish they could. It helps, but they still have a really good team, really good staff. I think Dustin May's back or about back as well, who's another guy that's a flamethrower, who I think had a Tommy John. Oh, yeah, Walker Buehler came back. I think he's still ramping up his velocity and stuff on some level probably. So he's fantastic. And then keeping Will Smith around is huge because, pitchers like consistency, just like you see with these guys, whoever you're throwing to does matter. And it's not a good, it's not always a great idea to have a carousel at catcher because there's no consistency there for your pitchers to be able to adjust to and understand. And, that's a real thing with those relationships and knowing where a guy likes it or how he likes to deal with this situation or that situation. And I think having Will Smith there in the long term is going to really help them. Plus, I think they had traded a couple of their catching prospects anyway over the last few years in some of these deals that they made. So they kind of had to do that. But they have the ability to pay people they want to pay. So that's nice. I'm sure we hadn't gotten back into the Doc's mailbag and we didn't prompt it or anything for the show. But I know Jim was saying, Jim Kapanis Jr., for those of you who haven't been watching us, all of our old shows are now up on a playlist. So what used to be the Backstop page on YouTube turned into something that's called Benny Takes On because I do a lot more things than just the Backstop. But the Backstop is now a podcast channel within that. And technically it actually never moved. I just changed the name on the top of the thing. But the Backstop is still there. All the previous shows we have are still there. You can go back and watch any of those, and we're going to add these, obviously, to that as well. And then Jim said he'll hop on when he can, when we have time. So, and then we're still working stuff out digitally as far as, how we're doing stuff and how to do it better and all of that. And I'm constantly trying to figure out ways to get better at doing that when I have time to. So, fantastic stuff. Eric, any closing thoughts today on our return to the Backstop?
No, I'm just glad we're doing it. I was glad to hear from you, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be quite a season, I think. Maybe the most eventful season that you and I have experienced together over the years. So, I'm looking forward to this.
This year definitely seems like it has a very Dodgers-Yankees vibe. A lot of years you say that, but those two seem like they're kind of on a collision course, unless the Rangers can pull out more Cinderella or the Astros can kind of find more, or Verlander turns back into Verlander on a full-time basis or something. But, a lot of really good teams in both leagues right now. It's so interesting with all the rule changes and stuff, how there's DHs now everywhere, and pitchers are trying to go longer, and, you have expanded rosters and stuff over the last couple of years. I think it went from 26 to 28 now, so more flexibility for teams. But you also see guys, because of that, coming up a lot earlier with service time and stuff. Yeah. So it's interesting to see guys that are getting drafted and really getting shots a lot sooner than in previous, eras of baseball where they would stay in the minors for a long time. I mean, some of your top prospects would still come up quick, but Now they're coming up quick, like a couple weeks or a couple months quick. So it's a whole different ball game. So it's kind of sink or swim now, or get replaced by the next guy, right? So it's going to be very interesting, and we're definitely have more backstop. We'll get on a semi-regular schedule, figure out what works best for everybody, and then. But there may be times like this where it's only two of us that can do it that day, and then the other day it's the other two or whatever, and or some days it'll be everybody. So, we just try to keep that flexibility and keep the content moving, and keep doing what we love for the game that we care about.
Right.
All right, guys, for Benny Bam, the doctor of baseball, Eric Lindbergh, the Velvet Voice, and somewhere off in the distance, the catcher who was never really a spy, Jim Capanis Jr. We will be back with you soon on the Backstop. If you have any questions, concerns, the great thing about YouTube is you can just post comments directly under the video. So if you have anything you want us to go over, just post them directly under the video, and please like and subscribe. That helps so much as far as the visibility and just everything that the algorithms allow you to be seen by. So just please, all we ask is that you, not for money, not for anything else. I mean, if you want to leave questions, great, or to the Doc's Mailbag on Twitter, like we've always done. But please hit those like and subscribe buttons. Or if you're watching on Twitch, you can obviously follow, which is like a like on YouTube. So appreciate it, guys. For Eric Lindbergh, Benny Bam, Jim Capanis Jr., that's the Backstop.